There are engines, and then there are legends. But what happens when a car company builds a monster so powerful, so raw, that they become afraid of what they've created? This is the story of the Chevrolet 427 L88, an engine so feared by its own maker, GM tried to bury it. They erased it from ads, hid it behind misleading specs, and lied to the very people who wanted it most. So why did GM lie about the L88? And why did they try so hard to kill off one of the greatest V8s they ever built? This isn't just an engine story. It's a tale of corporate fear, racing rebellion, and an underground legend that refused to die. To understand why the L88 was buried, we have to go back to its birth. A story of rebellion, ambition, and raw horsepower. Picture this. It's the mid-1960s. Chevrolet Corvettes are everywhere, slicing down American highways, turning heads wherever they go. On the streets, they are kings. But in the racing world, that's a different battlefield. And Chevrolet is nowhere near the throne. Why? Because in 1963, GM had slapped down an ironclad rule: no racing. The brass feared that motorsports could tarnish their image, bring political scrutiny, or worse, invite lawsuits. They wanted control, predictability, safety. But rules are for the timid, and inside the echoing halls of Chevrolet engineering, a quiet rebellion was stirring. At the center of it all was Zora Arkus Duntov. To some, he was the father of the Corvette. But to those who knew him, he was something far more dangerous. A man obsessed with speed. A man who lived and breathed racing. Born in Belgium, raised in Germany, trained as an engineer, and forged on European racetracks, Zora had a vision. The Corvette was not meant to cruise boulevards. It was meant to dominate the track, to terrify the competition, to leave spectators gasping. And in 1967, that vision became a reality. Hidden behind a nondescript badge, behind a brochure that understated its power, was the 427 L88, a mechanical masterpiece designed to shatter records, defy expectations, and most importantly, to survive the wrath of corporate caution. When Chevrolet released the L88 option package in 1967, anyone glancing at the brochure would have been underwhelmed. 430 horsepower, it read, just a whisper more than the standard 427 L71. On paper, it seemed almost polite, almost ordinary. Nothing to stop a heart or turn a head. Nothing to hint at the storm waiting beneath the hood. But that was exactly the point. Because GM lied. The truth was far more terrifying. Beneath the engine bay of that unassuming Corvette roared a machine capable of 560 horsepower. Some even say more. Forged aluminum heads, a solid lifter cam, a high compression block, and an 850 CFM Holley carburetor combined to create a V8 unlike anything the public or GM's executives had ever seen. This was not an engine meant for the boulevard. It had no choke, no fan shroud, no heater, and ran exclusively on 103-octane racing fuel. Traffic lights were an enemy. Stop-and-go streets were an affront. Idle was temperamental, and even experienced drivers found it unforgiving. But on the strip, the L88 was merciless. It tore through the quarter mile with a speed and ferocity that left competitors in the dust. It laughed at the ratings on the brochure. Every time the Corvette's rear tires bit the asphalt, it whispered the truth. This was not a 430 horsepower engine. So why did GM understate it? Because they didn't just want anyone buying it. The L88 was too fast, too dangerous, too uncontrollable. It wasn't a car for the faint of heart. It was a weapon, a rebel in a corporate uniform, and a secret too potent for ordinary drivers. And that secrecy would only make its legends grow. Here's where the story takes a darker, more rebellious turn. The L88 was never meant for you, the average buyer. It wasn't designed for the weekend hot rodder or the casual enthusiast who wanted a shiny Corvette for cruising down Main Street. No, the L88 had only one purpose: to dominate the racetrack, and to do it with merciless precision. But GM still clung to its corporate no racing policy. The executives feared controversy, liability, and bad press. They could not, under any circumstances, admit that this engine was a track weapon. And so, they lied. They rated it conservatively. They left it off brochures. They hid it deep in dealer order codes. They priced it sky high, over $1,500 more than the base Corvette engine, a fortune in 1967. This wasn't marketing, it was reverse psychology, a way of letting the curious find it while keeping the faint-hearted away. If you knew what the L88 really was, you could hunt it down. If you didn't, GM didn't want you behind the wheel. As Zora Duntov, the man who breathed life into the Corvette, famously said, the L88 was not designed for ordinary drivers. The result was staggering. In 1967, only 20 units were sold. In 1968, 80 more. And in 1969, 116. In total, fewer than 220 Corvettes ever left the factory with this engine. It was a ghost engine born to race, designed to terrify the competition, and hidden from the world. The L88 existed in whispers, in dealer secrets, and in the minds of engineers who knew they had created something extraordinary, something powerful enough to shake the very foundations of Chevrolet itself. Despite GM's desperate efforts to keep it in the shadows, the L88 refused to stay hidden. In 1967, Corvettes powered by this secret engine stormed SCCA and NHRA tracks, ripping through the competition with a speed and durability that left rivals dumbfounded. Every quarter mile, every twist and turn, the L88 proved it was more than just a number on paper. It was a monster in metal. Then came the big leagues: Daytona, Sebring, Le Mans. Privately entered L88 Corvettes began winning, dominating, rewriting the rules of the track. Each checkered flag brought whispers that could no longer be ignored. Wait, why didn't Chevy ever tell us this engine existed? The secret was leaking, and GM didn't like it. By 1970, the golden age of muscle cars was under siege. Emissions laws, insurance pressures, and corporate caution were closing in. GM saw their chance to quietly erase the L88. No fanfare, no celebration, no farewell. The engine that had terrified competitors, rewritten records, and become a legend among those in the know was gone. Buried, hidden, almost forgotten, except for the stories that refused to die. The L88 wasn't just an engine, it was a rebellion, a legend, a secret the track refused to keep. So why did GM try to bury the L88? The answer isn't simple. It wasn't just the racing ban imposed back in 1963 to protect the company's image. It wasn't merely the staggering cost of building a fully forged, high-compression, race-ready engine. And it certainly wasn't just the complexity. This was a V8 so brutal that even seasoned mechanics approached it with caution. No, the truth was far darker. Fear. The L88 wasn't controllable. It demanded 103-octane racing fuel to run properly, scorned traffic, and mocked the average driver. It could roar to life at idle, shake a showroom floor, and leave a trail of dust on anything that dared to line up against it. This wasn't a car for polite Sunday drives. It was a weapon, a declaration of raw, unbridled power, and GM executives didn't know what to do with it. It didn't fit the safe image GM wanted in the 1970s, a time when the muscle car era was giving way to rising insurance rates, new emissions, regulations, and the first waves of the energy crisis. The L88 made everything else in Chevrolet's lineup look pedestrian. It embarrassed the smaller blocks. It outperformed even the vaunted L71 and L72 engines, leaving GM's marketing and sales department scrambling. Worse still, it inspired rebellion. Dealers and customers who discovered it began whispering secrets, trading stories, and quietly racing Corvettes in SCCA and NHRA events. The engineers had built a marvel that the executives couldn't control. It was proof that sometimes the minds on the shop floor were smarter than the minds in the boardroom. So GM buried it. They moved on quietly to the LS6 and LT1, and eventually the emissions-choked small blocks of the late 70s. The L88 was gone from brochures, hidden in dealer order sheets, and largely forgotten by the public. But for those who knew, it remained a legend, a ghostly reminder of what American engineering could achieve when it refused to bow to fear. But the L88 never truly died. Today, the L88 is a legend. A real deal 1969 L88 Corvette can sell for over $3 million. Not because it's pretty, not because it's rare, but because it's truth, in an era built on lies. It's a reminder of what American engineering could do when the suits weren't watching. Collectors chase these cars not just for speed, but for the story. Because every L88 Corvette is a symbol of rebellion, a middle finger to bureaucracy, a love letter to racing, and proof that horsepower, when unleashed, doesn't need permission. Listen to that. That's not just an engine. That's a war cry. GM never wanted you to know the full story. They gave you just enough to ask questions and hope you wouldn't dig any deeper. But you did. And in doing so, you uncovered one of the most explosive chapters in muscle car history. The 427 L88 wasn't just buried by GM. It was buried alive. And even now, decades later, it still refuses to stay underground. What do you think? Did GM make a mistake trying to bury the L88? And would you have dared to drive one back in the day? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us, what's the greatest V8 engine of all time? And if you love stories like this, engines that were too powerful, too dangerous, or just too real for the automakers who built them, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the truth has horsepower, and we're just getting started.